Hello and welcome to our final chapter of our Ivy growth project. In this chapter we're going to composite the renders we've gotten out of Cycles 4D, and we're going to do that in After Effects. You can use any compositing program you like. I just wanted to show some uses for how we use cryptomatte, which is a recent feature in Cycles, and it's fantastic. And also just to take our scene to that final level. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and it's cached already the frames, and this was our mid shot, and I'm really happy how that's turned out. And you get the nice translucency in the leaves there. We've got that nice depth of field, and the motion's really nice as well. So let me go to fit to window. And first things first, I think it's a little bit flat at the moment and maybe a bit too dark, so I might actually bring the brightness up and give it a bit of a quick curves adjustment. So just start with something simple. Let's do curves. There we go. And just a very subtle, I'm going to bring that end down and that up. Actually, I might bring everything up. I just think at the moment it's a little dull. We're going to probably do an overall correction where we're going to warm the image up a little bit as well, but I just wanted from the off to kind of bring that back up again. A bit more of a natural tone as well. Yeah, I'm liking that. Second thing I always like to do in pretty much all of my scenes is actually to add a bit of a bloom effect, and I tend to use the beauty pass for this, or depending on what the inputs are, maybe it's an emission pass, maybe it's a diffuse pass or something like that. In this case, I'm just going to use the base beauty, and I'm going to rename it to bloom. I'm going to get rid of that curve. Actually, I'm going to leave that curve on because it might be useful to clip out some of the brighter parts. I'm going to drop a fast blur on. Now, obviously, there are plugins you can use for bloom and things like that. I'm trying not to rely too much on those. Just do a quick fast blur. Let's clip it a bit, like so. And I think if we go to like a larger, when we change the mode to add, and we get this nice blooming. Now, of course, we could have baked some blooming into the render, but I like to have control of it in post, and I'm sure that's a pretty sensible workflow depending on how much time you have, etc. So I'm just going to go about 20% on this one. And that's looking pretty cool. Let's just play it back. Should play pretty fast because we've cached it already in RAM once before, and it'll probably pick it up off the disk as well. Okay, that's looking quite nice. There is something that I like that I think is going to really sell it though, and that is to have a flare over the whole scene. So currently our sun is actually top left of our scene here, of our camera frame, and at the moment we have no kind of inkling that there is a light over there. Now I could just create some soft bloomed blurred shapes and kind of animate them with the scene, but I think it would be great if we could actually use the 3D data and then feed that into, we're going to use optical flares to create the flare. So let's jump into the 3D scene. So I've actually dragged in, you can actually, in After Effects, you can drag in the 3D scene from Cinema 4D. If we just drag that into our comp, and we'll see, we get a nice representation of our, like a viewport representation of our scene. Excellent. And it lines up, which is a good sign. And what we want to do is we want to extract the scene data. So just hit that button. We can then actually delete that Ivy growth. Now, I've actually already comped the other two scenes, and we'll go and have a look at them in a minute because we have some other things to do on them. So we actually don't need camera wide and camera close. We just want the camera mid. And if we actually go into one of the 4 views where we can see the positions of things, we can check that it's moving. Yeah. So you can see it's animating. Ooh, actually, it's probably easier to see in one of the side windows. There we go. Let's jump back into the single window. And then over here is the sun. When we imported it, it's seeing it as a, yeah, it's the ambient light setting. Just change that to, we could do parallel or spot. It doesn't actually matter. I'm going to do point. And now that's exposed our transforms. Now let's just double check we can actually see that somewhere. There we go. Okay, so now we have a light relative to our camera in the scene. Perfect. Okay, and like I said, that's just going to be a source for our flare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a solid layer. So just a solid black layer. I'm going to call it flares. And then I'm going to add the optical flares plugin. Now, if you don't have this, it's no need to worry. You can create flares in all sorts of different ways. You could use an asset, and you could actually even take that sunlight position and apply that to like a blurred layer or something like that. I like optical flares, of course, because it gives you sort of more advanced flare options. I'm actually going to jump into those options. I'm going to add the natural flares, and I liked there's one here that has that rim light that I quite like. So I'm going to just go for that. I'm not going to play around with it too much, but I am going to change the layer blending to an add. And you see that, get that nice stuff going on here. And I'm going to change the source type to track lights. And straight away, because our light is hugely bright, I believe it's like 300% or something. Yeah, 300%. Now I could drop that down there, or I can jump into the flares and we can multiply it down using the brightness here. And what I love about flares in when you're compositing is it really grounds everything, and it kind of makes it feel a bit more realistic in terms of merging with the frame. Okay, that's definitely too bright still, but we'll try it out. And I'm actually going to fake the center of the frame to be a bit more. So if I select the effect in the effects panel over here, and I just move this over here, we can make sure that we end up with more of this reflex in the frame. So I'm actually going to drop it. I don't want it to be too dominant in the frame. That's perhaps too bright. That one reflex is actually coming in a bit too much. So what I might do is I might go back to the center here. Just before that comes on is stop it. Yeah, around about there. Okay, I definitely think that's still too bright, so maybe go to 5% or 6%. But already just having that bright spot on the left-hand side here, actually, and the way it blends with the sky is making it feel, more realistic. There's a bright light source to our left. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. Now, I'm not particularly happy with the overall grade of this. I think there's probably too much of a neutral lighting on this. So I'm going to go for a warmer look. And I'm just going to use Lumitri for that. So let's create an adjustment layer. So if you Control Alt and Y, drop an adjustment layer in. You can also grab those from up here. So you can go New Adjustment Layer. And then we're going to add a Lumitri color correction layer. So Lumitri. Drop it on there, and let's rename this layer so we know it's color correction. I'm going to drop this below the flares and our 3D objects. Our 3D objects can be anywhere in our scene, actually. It doesn't actually matter in terms of layer order. So our flares are on here. They're very bright at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump into Lumitri, and I think we're going to go for a creative look. We're just going to use, or maybe, no, I think we'll start with the creative looks and just mess around from there. So for starters, I'm going to add, oh, there we go. Well, that's already quite interesting. There's a few that I like to look at, and I think we're going to go for a warmer one. So I know which ones from just experience, which ones tend to go a bit warmer. And of course, you can grab your own LUTs for looks and things. These Fuji ones are quite nice. This is all going to be down to personal taste and the project, and maybe you're matching a camera, so you might have a LUT from a camera. In which case, you might want the more of the realistic ones. That's actually quite a nice tone. Quite like that. But what I want is I actually want to warm it up, because the sun at the moment is a bit too. Yeah, so if I go for maybe the gold heat, let's go back to the beginning. And maybe we do need to put it above the flare, but let's just let that run. I think it's too bright as well. I think we need to scale back on either our bloom. Yeah, definitely drop the bloom down. So drop that to 10%. and just check that out. Yeah, I'm quite liking that look. I think we could definitely go for more warm colours. The curve on this one, maybe we want to rein that back a bit. No, actually, I do like that. Again, this will all be somewhat personal preference and what level of realism you're going for, if it's going to match a camera and that kind of stuff. So, okay, that's looking pretty cool, and I am fairly happy with how that is looking. What I want to do is I actually want to take a look at some of the other comps, because we haven't actually used any IDs. This has been a super simple comp. We haven't needed to use any of the render passes, that kind of thing. I actually only rendered out the cryptomatte layers and the beauty pass, because I was pretty happy with how it was looking. And workflows obviously will vary. Yeah, I'm liking that. I think that is still too... I'm going to put it above the flares, and that actually changes the look quite a bit. No. Let's just double check. So if I increase the intensity, obviously if I go to 200, it's going to go way high. But if I go to like 100, that's going to be warm and a bit more neutral there. I could always go into the basic correction stuff as well, but let's just double check some of these other ones. Nope, definitely not that one. So I think gold is definitely the one I quite like. I'm going to go back to the gold. It's got that warm. It's called heat, so obviously the intention is that it's got this warmth to it, and it brings the frame looks a bit more interesting. Okay, and we could always put in some other things, like we could add a vignette. So if I go negative on the vignette, and you see that just brings the edges a bit darker. This is where it should be under the flares actually, because actually no, that's quite nice. If I just go to -1, just so it's a bit more of a subtle effect. And once I see it in context of the other ones that I've already graded and comped, it might be worth coming back and tweaking this. Okay, well there we go. As I'm playing it back, it's getting pretty good playback, because like I said, it's cached, and Lumitri is nice and fast, which is great. And because the depth of field has been done in this shot, we're not spending any extra processing time later on, which I really, really do like that. I used to spend a lot of time getting depth passes to work. So there we go, there's our mid shot. And like I said, we might come back and tweak some stuff, but I want to jump into our close shot and take a look at the grading on that one, and maybe our wide, just to see how that came together at the end as well. But I've already comped this one, and you can see here, it's got its own color grading, and we've got this nice motion away, and we've got our growth. But one thing I noticed was that I didn't see enough variation in these, and the lighting has kind of flattened them out because of the angle we're at. A lot of the leaves are the same kind of, we're looking on the top of the leaf obviously, and we're not really getting that nice variation that I'd hoped for. So what we can do, and part of that is actually the grading. So like, you know, it might have started off, if I turn these other layers off, you can see maybe that was what we needed to leave it at, but I enjoyed the colors here, and I wanted to keep that comp looking the way it is. So there is a way that we can utilize the cryptomatte, because I've exported a cryptomatte with a material ID layer, and that's very simple to do. You just activate it, and you either select object or materials. And what I'll do is so if I go into my renders here and get close, we've got the cryptomatte layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an ID. Now when you add a cryptomatte layer, you won't see anything in the viewport here, and what you want to do is you need to add the cryptomatte effect. Cryptomatte, add that to the scene, and we immediately get a multicolored look at what has its own unique ID. So if we go to our cryptomatte effect over in the effects panel, click on anywhere on these in this area, in the settings area, and it'll pop up this dialog that'll allow you to select which layer. Now if I'd exported the objects as well, which I didn't do because I realized with that many objects in the scene, you could select individual leaves, but it would make the file larger. So I knew I only wanted the materials. So I'm going to click Layer Crypto Material, let it load in, cache in, and then I'm going to select just a couple, or maybe even just one of the leaf layers. So if you look at what I can do here, that then selects just those ones. And we can select the background, we can select any part of this that has a different material. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. And what we'll do now is we will change this output from colors to the matte only, so that we actually see that it's become a matte. And what we'll do is we will drag that down here below the color correction, and actually below. Oh no, actually, it doesn't really matter. It can be above the bloom or below the bloom. It doesn't really matter, but I'll put it below for now. And what this is going to do, we're going to add another color correction layer. So I'm actually going to just duplicate this Lumitri color correction layer, because I'm going to use those some of those, not all of those settings. I want to reset them, but so I'm going to say this is leaf color correction. I'm going to drop that below our cryptomatte ID. So I'm actually going to call this whatever you like, cryptomatte leaf ID. I'm going to hide it. And then on the layer below, I'm going to use that as the source for our Lumitri correction. I might actually have to do an inverse. We'll see. So I'm just going to click reset on our Lumitri just so that we go back to default. And let's just do a double check that it's actually... So if we actually grab something like tinting or temperature, make it really obvious, can you see that we're actually changing just those leaves? And that's really powerful. It's such a powerful feature to have IDs after you've rendered, but all in one file. Now the trade-offs there are the EXR itself can be quite large, but I think the benefit is just so worth it. So, okay, I think that's looking. And we've got some nice randomization in the color there, just by tweaking the temperature. I might drop it a touch. That's a bit excessive, perhaps. There we go. And we could also change the exposure, contrast, that kind of stuff, but that'll probably look quite artificial. There you go. So it's actually, the ID does not care where the light is. So maybe we could use a blending layer or something like that. But going to a low exposure is a bit more realistic, but it's still not great. So you might want to play around with which settings to tweak here. Let's just change the tint, which is essentially a hue shift. So there you go. You can getting different tones there. Well, that's all in the white balance. I should probably have done that in the creative and done some toning and things like that. But anyway, I'm pretty happy with that. And we definitely don't need the vignette. That's all good. Okay, so let's drop that a touch more. And like I said, I just wanted some more variation in those leaves. So let's see that animated. It might need to cache. I might give it a second. What it probably will be doing is retrieving the cryptomatte file, and that has to then grab that ID. So in workflow terms, to speed things up, if you have an ID that you're happy with, you might want to export that from After Effects and use that as your matte ID, and your scene would be perhaps faster. So I'm just going to pause the video here, let it cache, and then we'll have a look at the wide shot and then see them all together. Okay, and that's rendered, and we can play that back in real time now. That's looking pretty cool. Okay, so let's jump into what I'm calling the main comp, or the master comp, where I'm bringing all of these shots together. Actually, let's just take a look at the wide. So if we're in the wide shot, just take a look at that. Here it is without the grading. If I turn off all of these layers here, you can see it's quite neutral. I've got that curve on there as well. You can see. Turn them all back on, and you get that nice growth going on there. Yeah, I really like how it's giving you coverage of the arch here. You can see the potential here for creating shapes and revealing things and all sorts of cool stuff. So in particle effects. Okay, let's jump into our final master comp, just do our final checks, and then we'll call it a wrap. So here we go. It's playing nicely. That one's just cached, so it's nice and fast on the disk. Oh, spoke too soon. It might be that we're actually at half resolution here. No, it's taking its time. I've got a fade between these two, so you can see I've set this up already because I kind of knew how I wanted to time this out. And I've clipped certain parts of it and shifted it around. Obviously, your scene will be specific to you. If you've used this one, that's no problem. Obviously, you might have different camera angles and timings, that kind of stuff. One thing I will say is the growth might be a bit too fast in the center part here in the close-up. So might circle back round and tweak that and slow that down. But that's the beauty of these systems, is that you've got so much control. You can go back after the fact, maybe even duplicate, save a different file, and then do a slower version just for that close-up shot, and just only cache those frames, and then you're golden. Okay, so let's see it play back. Oh. Okay, wasn't looping. And you can see all the growth, as it grows up, the shadow becomes a bit more intense, and I really like that. So yeah, there we go. There's our final shot. And go ahead and add all sorts of extra comping mastery that I haven't got time for here, but hopefully you've enjoyed this project, and we'll see you in the next one.